My name is Lauren Carter, and I'm a 33-year-old marketing analyst living in Denver. If you asked anyone who knew me, they'd say I had it all: a solid career, a beautiful home, and a husband, Chase Anderson, who charmed every room he walked into. But if you looked closer, you'd see the cracks beneath the polished surface. You'd see a woman who learned to measure her words before speaking, who smiled at dinner parties while her heart curled tighter each day. I never imagined my marriage would end at Christmas dinner with divorce papers handed to me like a punchline. But what Chase and his best friend didn't realize was this: I wasn't the woman they bet on. I wasn't going to crumble. I was about to show them what happens when you hand a woman like me the knife and assume she won't use it. I don't remember exactly when Chase Anderson first learned to silence me with his words. Maybe it was that spring dinner party when I wore the red dress he once called stunning. That night, he raised his wine glass toward me, his eyes gleaming with amusement, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Trying a bit hard tonight, aren't we? Don't forget who paid for that dress." Laughter rippled around the table, light and effortless. No one noticed the sting blooming beneath my ribs, the way each chuckle sliced through me like invisible blades. The next morning, I folded that red dress away, shoved it deep into the drawer, and promised myself I'd never wear it again. Ever. Chase never shouted. He never threw things or raised his hand. He didn't need to. His words were quieter than rage, softer than fists, but sharper than any knife. You know I could leave you any time, right? Don't embarrass me in front of my boss. You're lucky I'm still here. He'd say these things while brushing my hair behind my ear or pressing a fleeting kiss to my forehead, as if cruelty was a form of affection. I learned to smile, to nod, to laugh at the right moment so the world wouldn't see. I was wilting inside. At night, lying beside Chase, listening to his steady sleeping breath, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder, how did I get here? I used to read before bed, but he hated the light, so I stopped. I used to eat rice with soy sauce and chili, but he said it smelled cheap, so I stopped. I used to hum while doing dishes, but he called it tacky, so I stopped. I used to be a spring garden. Chase turned me into a desert. He called it stability. One evening, carrying a tray of wine and snacks into the living room, I heard Nate's voice, low and amused. "Think she'll cry when you finally dump her women, man. One signature, and they collapse." Chase laughed, his smug chuckle curling around my throat like a chokehold. "She'll crumble. Women always do." I froze in the hallway. The tray trembled in my grip. My breath caught between my lungs and my mouth pulse roaring in my ears like an alarm. In that moment, something inside me broke and died. But from its corpse, something silent and unbreakable was born. That night, after Chase stumbled into bed, reeking of beer and arrogance, I knelt to take off his shoes, placed a glass of water by his side, and said in the gentlest voice I could find, "You always joke about leaving me. Maybe we should sign something just in case." He burst out laughing, careless and cruel. "You really think I need to protect my fantasy football winnings?" Then he grabbed a napkin, scribbled his signature with a flourish, and tossed it aside before passing out. I picked up that napkin with steady hands, folded it carefully, and stared at his sleeping face under the dim glow of the lamp. I felt nothing. Not fear, not relief. Just a quiet knowing. The next day I had it notarized. No trembling, no hesitation. From that day I began recording everything. The night he came home at 1:15 a.m., reeking of tequila and a stranger's perfume. The morning he called me useless for forgetting the dry cleaning. The dinner when he leaned in close and whispered, "If we ever split, you'll come crawling back. You can't do anything without me." I didn't argue. I poured him another glass of wine and smiled like I always did. That night, writing in my journal beneath the flickering lamp, I finally understood. He wants me to believe that without him, I'd die. But the truth is, it's living with him that's killing me. That night, Chase stumbled home drunk. Whiskey fumes and stale cigarette smoke clung to him like a rotting second skin trailing behind him in invisible tendrils as he fumbled with the keys at the door. The lock clicked open after the third try, and he stumbled inside, dropping the keys onto the console table with a metallic clang that echoed through the silent living room. I sat on the sofa, in the dark one lamp glowing beside me, cradling a glass of water between my palms. The condensation soaked into my skin, cool and grounding. I watched him sway under the dim light shoulders, slumped tie loosened around his neck like a noose he hadn't yet tightened. His eyes were bleary glazed with arrogance and exhaustion, the particular exhaustion of men who drain others just to keep their own hearts beating. When he finally looked at me, his lips curled into a crooked, humorless smirk. "Why are you looking at me like I'm about to read my will?" he rasped, his voice shredded from alcohol and late-night cruelty. I didn't answer. I placed a clean white napkin on the coffee table in front of him and set a pen beside it. My movements were slow and deliberate, like a nurse preparing a lethal injection. "You always joke about leaving me," I said softly, my voice as smooth as water slipping over stones. "Why don't you sign this, just in case?" For a moment, he stared at me, confusion flickering behind his heavy eyelids, then barked out a laugh. It was a sound thick with disdain, amusement, and careless certainty that he owned every piece of me. "You really think I need to sign something to protect my fantasy football winnings?" he slurred. Then, with all the arrogance of a man who believed his throne eternal, he scribbled his name across the napkin, a long, looping signature, his hand pressing down so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. He didn't read it, didn't ask, didn't care. When he finished, he tossed the pen aside, leaned back into the sofa cushions with a satisfied grunt, and closed his eyes, mouth slack chin, tilted up like a fool king falling asleep on his rusted crown. In that moment, under the dim gold lamp, I saw him clearly. Not as the man who once made my heart race, not even as the tyrant who ruled my days. I saw him for what he truly was, a small cowardly boy who mistook dominance for love. The next morning I woke before dawn. The sky outside was a slate gray haze, clouds curling low over the rooftops, and the winter wind rattled the window frames with hollow desperation. Chase still lay sprawled on the sofa, arms flung wide mouth open, snoring softly, the smell of stale whiskey and defeat rising off his skin like sour steam. I walked silently across the room, picked up the napkin, folded it with precise, measured care, and slipped it into my wallet. My hands didn't tremble. My pulse stayed steady. There was no fear, only a deep, bone-deep calm blooming in my chest, warm and solid like embers in a dying fire. On my way to work, I stopped at a small notary's office tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The woman behind the counter had silver hair pinned back in a tight bun. Her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose as she squinted at the napkin, then at me, then back at the napkin again. For a moment, her gaze lingered on my face, searching, questioning, but she didn't ask. She stamped it, signed it, and slid it back to me with a flicker of something in her eyes, pity perhaps, or silent respect born from knowing the quiet wars women fight. I offered her a small smile. I didn't feel pitiful. I felt peaceful, like a soldier sharpening her blade at dawn, knowing battle was coming, but not today. That afternoon, I scanned the napkin, attached it to an email, and sent it to the private account Jenny had set up for me years ago. My message contained only one line: "Keep this for me, just in case." Jenny didn't reply, but 5 minutes later I saw the notification file saved. That evening I came home and cooked dinner as if nothing had changed. I asked Chase if he wanted steak or salmon. I set the table, poured his wine, and sat across from him as he ranted about his incompetent colleagues, his voice thick with condescension. I laughed when he mimicked his boss nodding in perfect rhythm to his self-congratulating monologues. He didn't notice how my eyes no longer flinched when he spoke. He didn't see the stillness blooming inside me like black roses growing in secret. I never mentioned the napkin. I never let him see even the shadow of what I knew, because I understood something that night. I didn't need a plan for revenge. I didn't need to scream or shatter dishes. I only needed to prepare and wait for the day he handed me his own blade and believed I wouldn't use it. Have you ever held a weapon someone gave you, freely smiled sweetly, and waited, knowing one day they'd fall onto it themselves? After Chase signed that napkin, everything shifted inside me. I didn't leave. I didn't scream or threaten him. I simply stopped believing anything he said. The next morning, I woke up before him as always. I brewed his coffee careful to add the exact amount of cream and sugar he liked and placed it on the table in front of him. He sat scrolling through his phone, eyes glazed with the half-focus of someone who saw me as furniture rather than flesh. When he left for work, I leaned in to kiss his cheek. He didn't even look up. That used to hurt. The silent rejection, the cold indifference. It used to hollow out my chest. But that morning, it didn't. That evening, while he sat in his recliner, snoring softly, whiskey glass still half full on the side table, I bought a small black notebook. I slid it under my side of the mattress, hidden where he'd never bother to look. Every night after that, when he fell asleep, reeking of sweat liquor and stale arrogance, I would write in that notebook with steady, precise letters what time he came home, how many drinks he had, every insult he threw at me that day. I wasn't planning anything, not consciously, but writing it down felt like stitching myself back together with threads of truth. It made me feel sane, like I wasn't drowning in a world only I could see. One Thursday afternoon, folding his laundry with practiced hands, I found a receipt tucked into the pocket of his jeans. A hotel suite, 2 glasses of wine, chocolate-dipped strawberries, Valentine's Day. He had told me he was away for meetings that night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or tear the paper to shreds. I scanned it, saved it to my secret email Jenny had created for me years ago, and wrote it down in my notebook, neat and emotionless. Just another fact about Chase Anderson. A few nights later over dinner, he looked at me with that small, superior smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "If we ever split, you'll come crawling back," he said casually, stabbing a piece of steak with his fork. "You can't do anything without me." I looked back at him and really saw him. The thinning hair combed carefully to hide what age was stealing, the dark circles beneath his eyes from too many late nights, the skin sagging at his jawline. But his arrogance remained untouched, gleaming and smug as ever. I nodded and smiled like I always did. That's true. But inside, something deep and silent whispered, "No, it isn't. Not anymore." That night I woke up drenched in sweat from a dream where he stood above me laughing with cruel delight. "You'll have nothing," he sneered in that dream voice echoing like a death sentence. I sat up in the dark, wiped the dampness from my neck, feeling my pulse steady against my fingertips. The room was silent, save for his snoring, thick and oblivious. "That's not true anymore," I whispered to the shadows, because now I had the napkin he signed careless and drunk. I had the receipts, the dates, the insults etched into my black notebook like scripture. I had the truth. In truth, truth is power. The next morning as he left for work, he kissed my forehead. His aftershave burned my skin sharp and cold. He smelled like quiet victory, like a man who believed he was still untouchable. He thought he was kissing a woman broken beyond repair, a woman who needed him to keep breathing. But as the door clicked shut behind him, I stood alone in our kitchen, feeling the silence wrap around me like armor. For the first time in years, I felt steady, heavy with something strong and indestructible pulsing in my chest. He thought I was weak. He thought he'd won. He was wrong. Have you ever stopped believing someone and felt your whole body finally exhale like you'd been holding your breath your entire life until that single quiet moment of truth? After that night, everything I did carried intention, precision, purpose. I wasn't his wife anymore. I became his silent observer, his quiet shadow slipping through each room, recording every flicker of cruelty he thought was invisible. In the mornings, I still woke up early, brewed his coffee to the exact bitterness he liked, and kissed his cheek before he left for work. He barely acknowledged me, eyes glued to his phone as he scrolled through emails with a grunt. I still asked about his day when he came home, still plated his dinner with care, still laughed at his snide jokes when friends gathered around our table, my smile soft and empty. But inside, something deliberate pulsed through my veins, each beat whispering, watch, record, remember. I logged everything in my black notebook, the nights he came home reeking of perfume that wasn't mine, the bank withdrawals he never explained, the cash hidden in his gym bag beneath sweaty shirts, the silent insults, useless, pathetic, try harder always under his breath, just loud enough for my ears alone. I stopped reacting, stopped defending myself, stopped trying to make him see me. Instead, I let him believe I was fading, that his words had finally shattered me into quiet submission, and that illusion made him bold. He started leaving his phone face up on the kitchen counter screen, lighting up with messages he didn't bother hiding. Tonight, same hotel, don't keep me waiting. I didn't flinch. I didn't confront him. I simply synced his phone data to my private email, saving screenshots, forwarding everything to Jenny with subject lines as cold as evidence tags. I began marking dates in my planner, and X for nights he came home late, a dot for lies I could prove, a star for suspicious charges. To anyone else, it looked like meal plans or grocery lists scribbled by a dutiful wife. But to me, it was a map. A quiet, meticulous map leading me out of the prison he built from love and chained with fear. One evening, I walked past the garage and paused when I heard his voice, low and casual, drifting through the cracked door. He was on the phone with Nate. She'll fall apart if I leave. He chuckled. Too dependent. She can't survive without me. I stood in the shadowed hallway, hidden, listening to his arrogance curl around every word like thick smoke. My heart didn't ache. My eyes didn't sting with tears. I felt nothing. Because in that moment, something sharp and cold settled into my bones, a truth stronger than hope. He thought I was here because I needed him, but I was only here because I was preparing. That night, after he'd drunk himself into a heavy open-mouthed sleep, I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. Its blades cut through the stale air with rhythmic certainty, each turn slicing away my fear layer by layer. You think you're untouchable? I whispered into the darkness, my voice so soft it barely reached my own ears. But I heard it, and for now, that was enough. Have you ever let someone believe they held your life in their hands, while silently building a life that no longer included them? Knowing one day they'd wake up to find you gone and realize too late that you were never theirs to break. It was a Thursday morning when I realized I was ready. Chase left early for work, slamming the front door behind him like he always did. The sound reverberated through the silent house, rattling the picture frames slightly on the hallway wall. I stood by the living room window, clutching the coffee mug he left half-finished on the counter, and watched his car disappear down the street. As the taillights faded, something bloomed in my chest. Not relief, not sadness. It was something sharper. Something like power rising from my bones. I set the mug down carefully, its porcelain clinking softly against the countertop. Then I picked up my phone and called Jenny. She answered on the first ring, her voice quiet, steady, anchoring. Neither of us said hello. I just whispered, my breath trembling, but my words unbreakable. I think it's time. There was silence for a moment, a silence so heavy it felt sacred. Then she exhaled softly and said, "Come in today. Bring everything." That morning I moved through the house with a precision I hadn't felt in years. My movements were silent, fluid, purposeful. I gathered everything I had spent months collecting. The crumpled hotel receipts, each stained with his betrayal. The screenshots of messages flashing on his phone from women he thought I'd never know. The bank statements with unexplained withdrawals. The notarized napkin he signed without reading his careless scrawl, now my shield. My black notebook filled cover to cover with dates, times, words he flung at me like knives coated in honey. I placed them all into a simple black folder, each paper a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. When I zipped my tote bag closed, I looked around the kitchen one last time. At the gleaming countertops I scrubbed each night. At the mug sitting abandoned in the sink with its ring of cold bitterness dried against the porcelain. At the half-empty whiskey bottle on the shelf, silent witness to 1,000 small deaths. For a fleeting second, fear curled up my spine. Not fear of him. I had long stopped fearing him. This was fear of change, of stepping out into a world I hadn't lived in for so long that freedom felt like a foreign country. But the fear passed as quickly as it came. Because I remembered staying was a slow death each day, draining color from my veins until nothing remained but gray. Leaving was the only chance at life, even if it meant burning down every bridge he built to keep me caged. At Jenny's office, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white clarity. She sat behind her oak desk glasses, perched halfway down her nose, hair pulled back into its usual tight bun. When I walked in, she looked up at me with eyes that saw everything I was too exhausted to say. Eyes that carried a quiet strength, a strength I had borrowed from her so many times before. I placed the black folder on her desk without a word. Jenny opened it, flipping slowly through each page. Her eyes moved over dates, signatures, statements, over receipts that smelled of betrayal and inked screenshots that pulsed with silent humiliation. After a long stretch of silence, filled only by the ticking clock on her wall, she looked up at me. "Did he sign this willingly?" she asked, tapping the notarized napkin. I nodded, my voice coming out flat but unbreakable. "Drunk. But yes, no threats, no coercion." Jenny leaned back in her chair and exhaled, the leather creaking under her. She tapped her fingers softly against the edge of the folder. "It's enough," she said finally, her voice calm but edged with steel. "It's more than enough." I realized then that I had been clenching my hands so tightly in my lap that my fingers had gone numb. Slowly, I uncurled them, feeling blood rush back into my knuckles like a painful relief. "I don't want revenge," I whispered, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I refuse to let fall. I just want to feel safe." Jenny closed the folder with a deliberate snap and leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with a fierce steadiness. "You will," she said quietly. "But we're not just filing this. We're going to reinforce it. We're going to make sure it holds so tight he can't even breathe without knowing you're untouchable." For the next 2 hours, she worked. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she drafted addendums and clarifications. She built protective clauses, inserted loophole traps, layered legal steel around my case like armor forged in molten iron. Her words were precise, ruthless, uncompromising. Every signature he scribbled in arrogance was now a chain around his own neck. When she was done, she slid the final stack of papers across the desk to me. Her voice softened. "This isn't revenge, Lauren," she said, shaking her head slightly. "This is freedom." My throat tightened as tears welled up, hot and unsteady, blurring the edges of the world for a moment. I swallowed them down and nodded. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice cracking like glass under strain. Jenny gave me a small smile, her lips twitching with quiet victory. "Don't thank me yet," she said, eyes gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. "We're just getting started." I left her office with the black folder pressed tightly against my chest. Outside, the winter wind cut across my face, sharp and biting, but for the first time in years, I felt warm. Warm from the fire flickering deep inside my chest, refusing to go out. Because today, I had taken my first step. Because today, I finally moved. Because today, for the first time in forever, I felt alive. 2 weeks before Christmas, Chase got careless. He came home late again, the cold December air clinging to him, mixing with the perfume that wasn't mine. He didn't bother showering. Just dropped his jacket on the hallway chair, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed into bed beside me, exhaling stale whiskey and cheap floral sweetness into the dark. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as his breathing slowed into heavy, oblivious snores. At 3 a.m., his phone buzzed on the nightstand. The vibration hummed softly against the wood. I turned my head and watched as the screen lit up, casting blue shadows across his sleeping face. A message from Em. My fingers moved without hesitation. I picked up the phone, reading in silence. She doesn't suspect a thing. I'll file on Christmas. Want front row seats attached was a laughing emoji and a gif of a woman sobbing into a tissue. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. My eyes didn't blur. I read it twice, took a screenshot, emailed it to my private account, and deleted it from the conversation thread. Then I placed his phone back down, rolled over, and closed my eyes. His breathing never changed. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, brewed his coffee, kissed his cheek, watched him walk out the door, adjusting his tie in the reflection by the hallway mirror. He didn't notice the way I watched him, not with love, not with fear, but with a calm calculation he'd never recognize. Because he thought Christmas would be the day he broke me. He didn't realize it was the day I had already chosen to end him. The following days were a dance of shadows and masks. I cooked dinner like normal, answered his texts with polite emojis and heart reactions, laughed at his jokes at company parties, leaning into his side like I belonged there, all while gathering the final pieces: receipts filed, screenshots tagged, legal addendums reviewed, my black notebook filled with dates, lies, insults, my tote bag ready like an armory hidden in plain sight. Then Christmas Eve arrived. I woke before dawn. The house was silent and cold, every window glazed with frost. I stood in the kitchen, fingers curled around a mug of hot tea, watching the first gray light bleed across the yard. My hand rested lightly over my stomach. "This is it," I whispered to myself, the words curling into the quiet like a vow. The dinner table gleamed under candlelight. The turkey roasted golden and fragrant. Chase's parents spoke softly about Florida retirement plans. My sister poured deep red wine into tall glasses, her cheeks flushed from the oven's heat. Chase sat at the head of the table, carving the turkey, his face flushed with quiet triumph. He looked up once and caught my gaze. Slowly, deliberately, he winked the same smug wink he gave me on our wedding day, before leaning down to whisper, "You're mine now." But tonight, I didn't look away. I held his gaze, calm, steady, empty. Ready. After dinner, as guests wiped gravy from their lips and reached for wine, Chase stood tapping his glass with a butter knife. Before dessert, he said, grinning wide enough to split his face, "I have a little something for my beautiful wife." He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out an envelope. Plain white, no bow, no card. He handed it to me with a triumphant flourish. "Merry Christmas, Lauren." The table went silent, the candles flickering as if the room itself held its breath. I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately feeling each paper fiber under my fingertips. At the top, petition for dissolution of marriage. Already signed. Already filed. I looked up at him. His smile was wide, gleaming with expectation, waiting for tears, waiting for the collapse he had orchestrated so perfectly. Instead, I picked up my pen, signed my name in one clean, elegant stroke, dated it, capped the pen, and slid the papers back across the table. "Thank you," I said softly. Confusion flickered across his face, disrupting the smooth mask. Nate shifted uncomfortably beside him, eyes darting between us. Then I reached down and lifted a gold-wrapped box from under my chair, placing it gently in front of him. "Your real gift?" I said, my voice calm and clear. Chase frowned, tearing away the wrapping paper with impatient fingers. Inside was a black leather folder. He flipped it open, scanning the first page. I watched as his face drained of color, his lips parting, no words emerging. It was the notarized napkin, reinforced, legalized, updated with clauses Jenny and I had drafted over months, a fortress of ink and signatures. Nate leaned in, squinting. "What is it?" he asked. Chase's mouth moved silently, but no sound came. So I answered for him. "It's the agreement he signed willingly," I said. "It grants me everything under his own terms. All assets split as per his signature, irrevocable, filed, binding." The table stayed silent. His father set down his fork with a soft clink. His mother pressed her napkin to her trembling lips. My sister reached beneath the table and squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Then calmly, I reached into my purse one last time. I placed a small white envelope in front of him. Chase stared at it like it might explode. With trembling fingers, he tore it open. Inside was a sonogram photo. "I'm pregnant," I said softly, my voice breaking only with truth. 8 weeks today. For a brief moment, something like happiness flickered across his face, but it vanished the instant understanding dawned. Prenup, child support, custody, consequences. I watched as realization rose inside him like a slow, suffocating tide. His shoulders sagged under the invisible weight. His eyes darted around the table, seeking refuge he would never find. "You planned this," he whispered the words, trembling with disbelief and fear. I met his gaze steady and unblinking, with a calm, cold certainty that burned hotter than rage. "No," I said softly. "I didn't plan. I prepared." Chase sat there staring at the sonogram photo, trembling in his hands. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came out. The room was silent except for the quiet crackle of the fireplace and the soft clink of a dessert spoon against porcelain somewhere down the table. His father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. His mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, though her gaze wasn't sad for him. My sister squeezed my hand under the table so tightly I could feel her pulse against my skin, strong and fierce. Finally, Chase looked up at me. His eyes were wide, unmoored, desperate in a way I had never seen before. "Lauren, you don't have to do this." I tilted my head slightly, studying him for a long moment before offering a small smile. It wasn't cruel. It was calm. I wanted him to see that calm. I wanted him to know it was real. "I'm not doing anything, Chase," I said softly. "You did this." His gaze darted around the table, eyes wild, searching for someone, anyone to defend him, to tell him this wasn't happening, that his kingdom was still intact. But no one spoke. No one moved. He ran a shaking hand through his hair, fingers gripping so tightly his scalp reddened. It was the same gesture he always used when realizing he'd lost control during failed business deals, heated calls with his boss, the late credit card bills he hid from me. But this time, it wasn't a bill he could negotiate away. He looked down at the documents again, eyes scanning each line as if rereading them would change their meaning. As if sheer force of will could rewrite reality. But he couldn't, because his signature was right there. His date, his handwriting, his arrogance immortalized in legal ink. I reached for my wine glass, lifting it slowly to my lips. The cinnamon clung warm and sharp against my tongue. When I set it down, I met his eyes with unwavering certainty. "I'll have the locks changed tomorrow," I said softly. His shoulders slumped forward as if someone had cut the strings holding him upright. His eyes closed for a brief moment, and when they opened again, something flickered there that I had never seen before. Fear. Not the performative anger he used to keep me silent, not the shallow annoyance of his daily contempt. This was real fear, hollow raw, the dawning terror of a man realizing his empire was built on sand and the tide had come in. Suddenly, he pushed his chair back with a harsh screech against the wooden floor. The noise jolted through the silent dining room. "You think you've won?" He choked out, his voice cracking like thin ice under weight. I didn't answer. He didn't deserve an answer. He stormed out, footsteps thudding down the hallway. The front door slammed shut moments later, leaving behind the prenup, the sonogram photo, and the wreckage of every illusion he had so carefully curated. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my sister exhaled beside me, her breath shuddering in her chest. "I always hated that sweater on him," she whispered, her voice unsteady. A small laugh broke from my chest, quiet at first, surprised by its own freedom. It spread softly around the table, nervous laughter blooming into something warmer. Even his mother let out a faint, strangled chuckle, though she quickly pressed her napkin to her lips to hide it. I stood, gathered the untouched dessert plates with steady hands, and carried them into the kitchen. As I rinsed them under warm water, I waited for the trembling to come, for the fear, for the crushing grief of endings. But it never arrived. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't ache. I felt steady, rooted, alive. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house fell silent again, I sat alone by the window looking out at the yard, blanketed in soft falling snow. The world outside was hushed and clean, each flake catching the porch light like falling stars. I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling its gentle rise and fall beneath my palm, the small life growing there, warm and secret and mine. He thought I was nothing without him. I whispered into the quiet, my breath fogging the glass. I closed my eyes, feeling that truth settle into my bones like the deepest peace I had ever known. But I am everything because he's gone. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. For a moment, I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting to hear Chase's heavy footsteps pacing the room, the dull thud of his heels against the floorboards. Waiting to hear him sigh with irritation at the light filtering through the blinds. Waiting to hear his voice gravelly with sleep, muttering complaints about coffee, too bitter, too cold, too late, too something. But there was only silence. Heavy, vast, sacred. I turned my head to the side. The space beside me was empty. His pillow was gone. His side of the closet stood open, hollowed out a void where his pressed shirts and expensive ties used to hang like armor. Only a faint trace of his aftershave lingered on the sheets, sharp, sterile, fading by the minute. I sat up slowly, feeling the ache spread across my lower back, the gentle heaviness anchoring me to the bed. I pressed my palm to my stomach, feeling its quiet swell under my skin, small, growing alive. "It's just us now," I whispered into the quiet dawn. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold floor biting at my bare feet as I walked to the kitchen. The tiles were icy under each step, but I welcomed the sting. It reminded me I was here in my own skin, in my own life. I turned on the coffee machine, listening to its rhythmic drip, 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 as dark liquid pooled into the glass carafe. The scent rose warm and earthy, curling around the kitchen like a comforting hand. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to pour his cup. I didn't worry about getting the cream-to-sugar ratio perfect. I didn't worry about anything at all. I poured myself a mug. Black, strong. Exactly how I liked it before I learned to water myself down for him. I sat at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped around the ceramic warmth, and watched as the first pale gold rays of sun crept across the floor, painting thin lines onto the cabinets and counters he once criticized for being cheap wood. Outside, the yard was blanketed in fresh snow, clean, untouched, a blank page waiting for me to write my name across it. Later that morning, I picked up the phone and called a locksmith. "Emergency change or standard?" he asked, his voice brisk and businesslike. I paused, letting the silence breathe between us for a moment, then said, "Standard. But please make it fast." When he left, I stood in the doorway, the new keys cool and heavy in my palm. I squeezed them tightly, feeling their metal edges press into my skin. They felt solid. They felt real. They felt mine. That evening, as dusk fell violet across the snow outside, I moved back into the master bedroom. I stripped the bed of its sheets, bundled them into black trash bags, tied them tight, and shoved them into the back of the hallway closet. The smell of his aftershave still clung to the fabric, sharp and sterile like antiseptic, but it was fading, fading, fading. I opened every window wide, letting the winter air rush through the room in crisp, biting gusts, sweeping away everything stale and lingering. The curtains billowed like ghostly sails in a quiet sea breeze. For the first time in years, the air smelled like nothing, like possibility. I lit 3 sandalwood candles, the ones I used to love before he claimed they gave him headaches. Their warm, smoky scent rose into the room, curling around me like a quiet embrace, wrapping me in something old and familiar. Something I thought I'd lost forever. I stood there for a long time, breathing deeply, listening to the silence echo through the house, settling into the walls, filling each hollow corner with quiet strength. I closed my eyes and let it anchor me all the way down to my bones. And for the first time in so many years, I felt it settle into me. This was my home, not his, mine. By Christmas morning, the house felt different. It smelled of cinnamon and sandalwood instead of stale whiskey. The windows were open, letting in cold, fresh air that carried the faint scent of snow. My sister was in the kitchen humming as she whisked pancake batter. Jenny sat at the table sipping her coffee, scrolling through baby name lists on her phone. And me, I sat by the window, wrapped in a thick knit blanket, hands resting on my belly, feeling every slow, strong breath of the life growing inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for a harsh word. I wasn't waiting for footsteps or a sigh of annoyance. I wasn't shrinking myself small to keep the peace. There was no one here I had to shrink for. Later that morning, I went into what used to be Chase's office. I had already cleared it out. The heavy oak desk he insisted on gone. His leather chair sold. In its place, a small white crib sat near the window, tiny golden stars hanging from a mobile above it. The walls were painted a soft sage green. In the corner stood a stuffed giraffe almost as tall as me. I stood there, resting one hand on the crib's wooden rail, feeling the warmth of tears prick at my eyes. But they weren't sad tears. They were cleansing, light. He once told me I would be nothing without him, that I would crawl back, beg, break apart. And for a long time, I believed him. I believed him so deeply that his words shaped my bones, curled around my lungs, and squeezed my heart into silence. But now, I placed both hands on my stomach, feeling a small kick ripple under my skin. "You are everything I need," I whispered to her, "and I am everything without him." That evening, as the sun set in soft orange and pink outside the window, Jenny sat beside me, reading aloud names from her list. My sister cooked dinner while humming Christmas carols off key. The baby kicked again, a small, insistent reminder that life was growing inside me no matter what had been torn away. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, not because he'd lost, but because I was finally living a life that belonged only to me. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for listening without judgment, for feeling each quiet heartbreak and every calm victory with me. Thank you for believing that strength doesn't have to be loud and that freedom isn't always found in revenge. Sometimes it's found in finally choosing yourself. Yes, I had already cleared it out. The heavy oak desk he insisted on gone. His leather chair sold. In its place, a small white crib sat near the window, tiny golden stars hanging from a mobile above it. The walls were painted a soft sage green. In the corner stood a stuffed giraffe almost as tall as me. I stood there, resting one hand on the crib's wooden rail, feeling the warmth of tears prick at my eyes. But they weren't sad tears. They were cleansing, light. He once told me I would be nothing without him, that I would crawl back, beg, break apart, and for a long time I believed him. I believed him so deeply that his words shaped my bones, curled around my lungs, and squeezed my heart into silence. But now, I placed both hands on my stomach, feeling a small kick ripple under my skin. "You are everything I need," I whispered to her, "and I am everything without him." That evening, as the sun set in soft orange and pink outside the window, Jenny sat beside me reading aloud names from her list. My sister cooked dinner while humming Christmas carols off-key. The baby kicked again, a small, insistent reminder that life was growing inside me no matter what had been torn away. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, not because he'd lost, but because I was finally living a life that belonged only to me. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for listening without judgment, for feeling each quiet heartbreak and every calm victory with me. Thank you for believing that strength doesn't have to be loud and that freedom isn't always found in revenge. Sometimes it's found in finally choosing yourself.